Started to see a regression. Now, prior to, he did have all his little baby words, mama, dada, baba, uh-oh. And he was doing good. But I started to see this slow decline. And first it started with speech. So it went from mama to ma, da, and then down to nothing. And then we started to see him lose some of his motor skills. So he couldn't jump on 2 feet. He couldn't climb the way he used to. He used to climb everything. And the light in his eyes just went out. That's kind of how I just describe it. From there, I kept asking questions over and over and over again. What's wrong with my child? Why is he regressing? And I got the same old song and dance. This is normal. I'm like, there's nothing normal about this. He started having abnormal behaviors. He would spinning, stacking, tantrums because he couldn't communicate mostly. And I didn't know what to do. So I always say, when I've had really tough times in my life, God has always sent me an angel. And it's going to be hard for me to not get emotional. But I went back to the office one day and I was at my wit's end. The owner of the preschool had actually told me, you cannot have your kid here. He's got special needs and we have no place for him.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how old was he at this point?
He was already 3. And I had, at his 3-year visit, I had asked his pediatrician, is it possible my son could have autism? And she said, no, he just needs speech.
So this is a long while that this is going on without answers.
Yes. So I went back to the office. I'm crying. I didn't know what to do. And lo and behold, there's this woman. My husband's like, oh, I hired a new front desk lady. And I'm like, oh, hi. And she had a son with autism. And so she started asking me some questions and laying things out. And she said, after the age of 3, you can have him evaluated through the school district. And so I called up Launch Preschool that was in Torrance at the time because we were living in Redondo Beach. And they immediately scheduled a phone interview. And she said, after talking to you today, I realized you need a full interview. You need a full evaluation for your son. And so I was like, okay, set it all up, did all the paperwork. We gave some paperwork to the preschool teacher. She spent a lot of time with him, saw a lot of his behaviors. It was from a different point of view. And I'm grateful for that because I was a little bit in denial. I didn't want to believe that my kid could have autism or there could be anything wrong with my son. We had the interview. It was about 3 hours long. There was a child psychologist, a speech pathologist, and a special education teacher. And so the speech pathologist and there was a physical therapist, occupational therapist as well. They took Noah into a different room. And we sat with a child psychologist as she asked us a lot of questions. And so from there, it was about a 3-hour interview. They met for 20 minutes after and they came back in and they're like, I'm very sorry to tell you, but we find that, Noah is autistic-like. Now, a school district cannot diagnose a child with autism. They can use the words autistic-like and they can provide services. So what she did was she, laid everything out. All I heard that day was autism. I think everything else went one ear, out the other, and I didn't know what to do or say. So I went home, and prior to going home, I went back to the office, and here's my number 2 angel. I was walking down the hallway, and my naturopathic doctor his office was adjacent to ours, saw me in the hallway, and he gives me a great big hug. He saw me crying, and he's like, what's the matter? And I said, well, Noah has autism. And he said, Noah's going to be fine. He said, I want you to go home and I want you to do your homework. Because he knew I was a big research junkie. So I was a part of one of his research studies for the Beamer device.
I love Beamer.
Yes.
I have one on my couch.
Yes. So the main doctor, Dr. Joshua Burka, who is super amazing, is the spokesperson and lead scientist for Beamer. And I was part of the study way back in, I think, 2008 or maybe
Wow.
sooner. And so he's like, you love research, go home, do your research. Kids are making such great strides with biomedical intervention. Now I'm like, what the heck is biomedical intervention, right? So I went home and I sucked those tears back up into my eyes. I got to work. I became the biggest nerd ever. And the first book I read was Louder Than Words by Jenny McCarthy. And people can give her as much crap as they want, but she's amazing. And that book gave me hope. And it made me a story. I didn't feel like I was so alone in the world. Because even though I have an amazing husband and a great family, I felt very alone. So I started my research from there. Back then, they had what you call DAN doctors. They followed a Defeat Autism Now protocol. You probably know what that is. Now they're MAPS doctors. It's Medical Association for Pediatric Special Needs. And I was calling all these doctors and I'm like, oh my gosh, they are charging an absolute fortune. And so my naturopathic doctor, again, assisted me in finding the most perfect doctor, called all the DAN doctors in LA County and asked them all kinds of questions and found the most perfect doctor. And she is still my dearest friend and doctor today. I absolutely love her. I think she actually lives right down the street from RFK Jr.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he knows her. So a small world, right? And at the time, we were completely broke. So as you know, my husband fights against insurance companies. And when you fight against them long enough, they fight back. So he had worked the fires in 2007 in Northern California and exposed the insurance company and the insurance commissioner for the state of California for fraud and collusion. And they did a smear campaign on him, and he wound up on the front page of the LA Times, 4th of July weekend, Sunday paper, big and bold. And I'm like, and we lost everything. He lost his business of 20 years. I was literally, if I could pick it up and put it on eBay, I sold it so we can eat. Luckily, the housing market crashed at the time and we didn't have to worry about moving out of our home. And I know, crazy, right?
When it rains, it pours.
It does. I had to have surgery that year. Noah was diagnosed with autism. His ex-wife was taking us back to court for more money that we didn't have. I could literally go on and on of all the things. But I was determined. Somebody told me my kid could live a normal life. So there was nothing that was stopping me. I bartered for treatments. So when I wanted hyperbarics for my son, I said, listen, I'll do your marketing for you. I have a marketing degree. I'll work your front desk. I'll scrub your toilets. I really don't care. And they were a great group of guys that owned this hyperbaric place. And so they allowed me to do their marketing for them on the weekends. And I was able to get Noah his hyperbarics. And my doctor at the time, Dr. West, she was able to, allow me to make payments and then bill my insurance for whatever. And it just worked out. So after just a few months of doing the diet, no gluten, no dairy, no soy, and eventually we had to remove, refined carbs and sugars, he just started putting words together and I was blown away. So I was on a roll. Now, unfortunately, not all children respond like this. So I was very blessed that Noah was able to respond this way. And then all the test results came back. She put him on a protocol. And from there, we did a little bit of chelation. We did some hyperbaric oxygen therapy. A few years down the road, we did the Bradstreet protocol, which was GC MAF shots for 6 months. And then we went to MCell out in the Ukraine for stem cell therapy. I told Noah at the time, I said, listen, if you do this, I will let you to go anywhere in Europe you want to go. And he's like, okay, Pisa. And I'm like, Pisa. And I'm like, okay. So we went to Pisa, Italy, and he got to see the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Wow. How old was he at this point?
7.
Wow. The boy that knows what he wants. I like it.
Right?
Oh my goodness. One of the things that amazes me about moms that have injured children is you literally become an expert in the field of whatever it is that has injured your child. There is no more well-researched, more well-educated person than a mom who's trying to protect their baby and heal their baby. But one of the things that I find is for a lot of people in this movement that have vaccine injured children, that are dealing with all the COVID mitigation protocols, everything that's going on, a lot of times we kind of lose ourselves in that work. And one of the things that's really striking to me about you is writing a book, being out there, doing all these things. Like, you really, through this whole process of healing your son, you found some place in yourself. Did you know that it was there before this, or was this something that was discovered through this process of healing your son?
Just a little bit. I've always been fascinated with medicine, always. I was in the Air Force when I was younger, and I really wanted to be a paramedic, and I didn't get that job. But I learned so much about medicine. And then when I got out, I started studying nutrition. And so when I was younger, I was like total health nut, studied all like these different diets, and realized that through this journey, I found my purpose. So I went back to school for complementary and alternative medicine after I got my marketing degree. When they announced that they were going to they were going to rush a COVID vaccine, I said, here we go. Mm-hmm. And I had been fighting this fight for so long. We go up to the Capitol, we fight all the mandates in California. It's crazy. And people can call me nuts all they want, but I tell them all the time, I said, listen, I watched my son regress. I literally watched with my own eyes. And unless you've actually walked a mile in my shoes, you just don't know. And writing this book, it wasn't about me being angry. What I wanted to do was come from a complete space of love so parents would be inspired to heal their child. Because first, it starts up here and here, and then you just leave the rest up to God.
It's literally just a mother or a father's protective instinct by sharing what's happened to their child, that they could prevent another parent from making the same decision that they made. So talk to me about the guilt and all the things that come with. So many of the parents that I've interviewed carry this enormous weight, that the could-haves, the would-haves, the should-haves. How do you, or how have you dealt with that in your own life?
So I always say God has a purpose for all of us. And he put Noah in my life for a reason. Now, did I have a lot of guilt that I vaccinated him up to age 3 and that I was his incubator? I was in the military. All my health problems started after I was vaccinated. Chronic migraines, fibromyalgia, diagnosed in my 20s.
Wow.
Somebody who worked out, ate healthy, was diagnosed with all kinds of stuff, polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, fibroids. Noah almost didn't make it because he was smothered by a mass of fibroids in my belly. I was like carrying twins. And the list goes on. Meniere's disease. I lost my hearing in my right ear. All these things. And I was his incubator, and even because I love my doctor, but she's like, it probably started with you because you can pass down a toxic load to your child. So, but I come to learn he's so special. And even though he's fully recovered, he's doing well. He's graduating from high school this year. He can drive, he can cook, he can't clean yet. Yeah, we're working on that.
Yeah, good luck with that. Teenage boys and cleaning don't really go together, I find.
Right. So people ask me all the time, well, does your son still have an autism diagnosis? And I said, well, if he was to go get a diagnosis or to go to a clinical psychologist today, he probably wouldn't be diagnosed with autism. But as he and I both agree, autism is a part of his life. It's a part of who he is, and he honors that, and so do I. And I'm truly grateful. So many parents that I come into contact with are like, oh, I'm so sorry. So don't be sorry. On this journey, I have assisted so many parents in healing their children. It's so worth it. And to have this wonderful human being in my life, because he really is a wonderful kid. He will give the shirt off his back for his friends, for anyone. He's like, I love you, Mom. I might not agree with your beliefs, and you're a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. But, oh, yes. We do live in California.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, but I'm like, senior year, I can't really do anything now.
So let me ask you a question, because this is something that I know a lot of parents in our movement worry about, is this big push for teenagers and young adults to make their own decisions and all this peer pressure that they feel. Do you feel like your son has a great understanding and awareness about what's happened to him, that he'll have the fortitude and the strength to be able to combat all of the peer pressure and everything associated with getting vaccinated and, being part of the crew that is doing what they should to protect the greater good?
Unfortunately, no.
Really?
I wish I can say that my son, really believes in what's going on. He doesn't like anything that has to do with politics, vaccines, anything. He's like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to talk about it. I mean, we've literally stapled him down to a chair and been like, you get to watch this video. That's it. You watch it. That your life depends on that. And we'll bribe them. We'll do whatever. But I've clearly told them, and I have found a doctor recently who told him as well that, Noah, if you were to get a COVID vaccine or any vaccine, it could be life-threatening to you. And I was truly grateful, because I didn't tell her to say that.
Wow.
So I think in the back of his mind, he gets it, but all of his friends were vaccinated. I said, okay, well, tell me, all of your friends have been vaccinated or boosted, whatever, and you haven't. They've all gotten COVID. Have you?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, no.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I rest my case. Yeah. But yes, it's something I'm going to have to constantly, be that pushback. Even though he turns 18 next year, I'm like, you go get a vaccine. I swear to you, I will take everything from you.
Has he discussed the possibility? Because I know come college age, one of the biggest fears that I have as a mom is that, my son is a very talented, very motivated hockey player. There's a lot of things coming at him, and hockey is basically like a Northeast sport. And a lot of the schools in the Northeast do not accept religious exemptions. I know California is the worst. It's the belly of the beast. So what conversations are you having with him now? And what advice would you give to parents that are dealing with this? I mean, it's a real fear, and the propaganda and the machine is working against parents. They're trying to stamp out parental voices and make it this, one size fits all. You do your part to protect everybody else, and don't worry about your own personal health.
Yeah. So my recommendation, one is parents who live, if Noah was younger and he was still in grade school or whatever, Steve and I would for sure 100% move. I want to move now, but I can't get my husband to leave. Because the one bill that came out that says we don't have access to our children's records over the age of 12, that's ridiculous. So I just heard from another woman this last weekend who said she went in, took her son in for a visit, and they have Kaiser, took her son in for a visit and said, I can't get into his portal. And they're like, no, and you won't, because you don't have the rights to have access to his medical records once they reach 12. And I'm like,
wait, once they reach 12?
Yeah, once they reach 12 years old. 12. We can't. So to me, leave. I mean, as for college, I, for the longest time, was like, Noah, you got to go to college, la, la, la. You know, you get to go to college for free. I'm a disabled veteran. So in the state of California, they have CalVet. And kids who have parents that are disabled and can go to college as long as it's a public college for free.
Wow.
Right. But the good news is my son is like, Mom, are you okay if I don't go to college? I'm like, yes, I'm absolutely okay if you don't go to college. So he wants to be a film editor. He's done film all through high school. He's learned so much about film. He's also, you know, a bit of a self-starter and learner himself. And my husband has a lot of good film editors that have worked for him. And so they have offered to train Noah. And so we're just going to put him through some training. If there's extension courses that he can take, he'll probably do those, but he doesn't want to do college. And honestly, at this point, even though before I was like, oh, okay, you got to go to college. And now I'm like, no, I don't want you to go to college. Please don't go to college.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're indoctrination centers. And the truth is that the only thing you're guaranteed with at this point is a huge loan that you have to pay off with no guarantee of, you know, even being able to find a job to pay it off. And I find that a lot of these students are coming out, they're going in with one set of moral fiber and beliefs and coming out a completely different child, because it's such a really like hard press to indoctrinate them into these beliefs that are being perpetuated. It's sad.
Yes. Unfortunately, because you know, I can't risk it. So I was either going to move him out of California, and I don't want to be like, hey, you have no choice. I'm not going to support you unless you go, because I have the understanding and the belief, and I truly believe this, that my son is on his own perfect journey, and that, you know, God doesn't give us more than what we can handle, but he has to be able to do things for himself. You know, and I tell him all the time, I've taught you as much as I can at this point. I've given you as much information as I possibly can. And beyond that, it is up to you to make the right decisions for your life. And we just reiterate it over and over and over. You know, you're risking your life doing this. He has agreed to go to his medical visits. We see a functional medicine doctor every year. And because he has pandas that keeps reoccurring every now and then, that's pediatric autoimmune neuropsychotropic disorder associated with strep. Yep. Say that 5 times real fast.
And find a doctor who, I had the same issue, my son, and find a doctor who actually recognizes that it's a thing.
Yeah. So most doctors don't. And actually, I had a really great talk with Dr. Pierre Corey, and I didn't realize that one of his children almost died from pandas. I didn't think that that was possible. So I've always had Noah monitored, and it's always popped up, and we've always done different treatments, mostly IVs, IVIG. We've even done antibiotics in the past. Now we do a lot of ozone therapy, and literally, bless his heart, he goes into the IV place and he's like, okay, go ahead. And I'm like, he gives him no problem. He's just, you know, and that's what we did also during COVID when it first started. We started going in for immune boosting IVs, high dose vitamin C, all these things. I was just getting Noah's immune system boosted. Everybody was getting sick. Noah was doing just fine. And it was working really well. So, but I never realized how life-threatening it could be until I talked to Dr. Corey.
So tell me about the inspiration for the book, and where do you find the time to do this with everything else that you're taking on in life? That's the big question.
So when I first heard that they were going to fast track a COVID vaccine, I'm like, oh. And for the last 10 to 12 years, I wanted to write a book about my story. It's gone, like, I've gone over it in my head, what I would say. And a friend of mine, she had just written a book, and it became like an Amazon bestseller. And I'm like, I've always wanted to write a book about my journey with my son. And she's like, well, what's stopping you? Now's the perfect time. So I saw that there was a need for it. And what I wanted to do with my book is I wanted to give all the information that I knew I needed at that moment when I was first given Noah's diagnosis. One, hope and inspiration. And I needed to feel like I wasn't alone in the world. So in part 1 of my book, I tell my story, and it is very inspiring because we did lose everything. I've talked to parents that are like, I can't afford this treatment. I can't do this. I can't do that. And I'm like, you know what? You can't do it because you won't do it. I said, because I had nothing. I barely had 2 nickels to rub together and lost my home, lost everything. And I still managed to create it. It's all about being a powerful creator. So that's like part 1. And then part 2, I spent 2.5 years trying to figure out what was wrong with my child. So what information do parents need to not have to go through what I went through in those 2.5 years? So I give them resources. What do you do if you think your kid could have autism? What are the signs and symptoms? What are the great organizations out there that you can go through? What are great books that you can read? All these things that you can't Google these days, because back then I was able to Google healing autism, and I got a whole laundry list of stuff that I could, do and look up, but you can't do that no more, unfortunately. And then part 3 is all about healing, all the different healing modalities, biomedical intervention, whatever it is that you want to call it. And what I did personally to heal my child. So I got on the phone with my doctor. I'm like, what did I do? Go through his records. I want to be very specific. So I did have the assistance of doctors, and then I did write a vaccine section. But I didn't come from a space of anger when I got into the vaccine part of it. At first, I went over it in my head like over and over. I wanted to reach parents. And the way I figured I could reach parents is just being open, honest, and giving them facts. So they needed facts, and I had to back it up with research. Unfortunately, it took about 3 months of research to find all the research studies that I backed all my information up with, because they were so buried. And I had to go through pages and pages and pages of stuff. And so I wanted to compile all this and give it to parents, that because I knew what was coming, I saw it. And at first, what did we have to do at the beginning of COVID? Although I had a bunch of clients, because I'm an integrative health coach, that I had clients like crazy virtually, because everyone was sitting on their couch, eating their bonbons and gaining weight. So I found the time, and I did go through some humps, because I never wrote a book. The first publisher I went through, it didn't pan out, and I lost the money there. And from there, I hired an amazing literary coach who became my editor. So she was an editor for a conservative publishing company for over 20 years. And she just guided me through the process. And she even set up a bunch of interviews for me. And from there, I finished my proposal, and I just started writing again. And through that process, we were able to find a publisher to pick up my book, and Morgan James Publishing picked it up. And then I had a deadline. And they're like, okay, well, we need a fully edited copy by the end of August. And I'm like, oh, that's easy. Now, I didn't realize how long editing took by any means. We started in May and finished literally the end of August. So we got all that done. Our graphic designer that my husband's had working for him for many, many years designed the cover of it. He's just amazing. And I'm truly grateful. It's another journey, another process, and all these, like, now people are like, well, what did you do when you wrote a book? I want to write a book. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what you need to do, and this is what you don't do.
Right. We have to have you come onto a show to talk about that, because honestly, I think writing books is one of the biggest things right now. Like, even at CHD, we're so committed to getting books out there because there's censorship on all the other platforms. It's like, we need to get this important information out one way or the other. And there are a lot of mistakes that people make along the way. So I think it's amazing to me that you've taken this journey that you've been through and you've created this chronicle of how you got to where you are with your son. And in the process, really created this place where people can find inspiration and empowerment as they're going through their own process. So what I want to ask you is, for moms who are getting that news right now that their child is being diagnosed on the autism spectrum, and they're sucking back the tears and trying to deal with all the things that come with this diagnosis, what would you like to tell them as far as advice for how to take it step by step, day by day, and make that journey to healing?
Well, the first step is believing that your child can heal, because if you don't, that'll work against you 100%. And next, just know that these amazing human beings came into our lives for a wonderful purpose. And you can look at the glass half full, or you can look at it half empty. And you could say, well, what can I do with this experience? Even though it's something that's, not the most positive thing that's happening in my life, what can I learn from it? What can I do? And to really, really pick up books, because you cannot Google healing autism anymore. Pick up books, not just my book. There's so many books out there. There's a lot on the CHD website, especially like J.B. Hanley's books. Him and his wife were the founders of Generation Rescue. And I've thoroughly learned so much from his books just recently, and, RFK Jr.'s books. I had to tell you, I had to read it in pieces, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that these things are happening in the world. Have a little romance novel in between. But you have to read books. You have to. And you have to cater to yourself. Because if you don't give yourself a little bit of me time, no matter how that is to look, and just take a breather. I remember coming back from a training one time, and I looked at my son, and there were a lot of things, because he was very rambunctious, and, he'd have his tantrums every now and then. I said, listen, if you ever feel like I'm being a little too harsh, or if I'm yelling or whatever, just look at me and say, Mom, come from a space of love. And I can't tell you how many times he's shifted me because he took that and ran with it. He's like, Mom, come from a space of love.
I love that.
And it was the cutest thing. So really, if you just look at it as, this is your beautiful journey, this wonderful child is put into your life for a reason. And they're all amazing. They're all different. They're all amazing. They're all somewhere along the spectrum, high functioning, low functioning, in the middle functioning, whatever it is. And you just have to believe, it was said in the Bible, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. And so I quoted that in my Bible, or I'm in my book. And literally, you have to truly, truly believe that your child can heal. And then from there, you just leave it up to God, and you just trust that God has their own perfect path for them.
And for you, I mean, what you've accomplished and what you've done with the situation and really turning all of the emotion into meaningful action is so amazing. And I'm sure that you've helped countless people that you don't even know. So I'm so thankful to you, and I'm so happy that we were able to meet in person. And I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation with you and your husband. Both of you have some amazing skill sets to offer. So thank you for being here and for sharing your journey with us today.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me.
Thank you. And we'll definitely look to you soon for some updates.
All righty.
All right. Thanks so much, Tracy.
All right. You take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into the People's Testament. The purpose of this program is to amplify the voices of those who've been injured and killed by big industry that puts profits before people. There is a silent universe of people suffering because of the negligence of our governing agencies and big industry. This negligence continues to impact hundreds of thousands of families on a national and global scale, many whose lives will never be the same, and often whose stories will never be told. Please share Noah's story. Together, we can create a safety net of support for those affected. Their testaments are real, not rare. If you have a story to tell, please contact me at advocacy@childrenshealthdefense.org. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.